Can you get her to talk to mine? And yeah, that's right. I just got the Star Trek. Okay, I got to shut up now. All right, moving along.
But I got to kiss LE on order.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right, did you film him on WAS yet? Okay. Oh,
yes.
Yeah, this is called dick measuring, and we do it once in a while. And it's got nothing to do with the switch matrix.
Because I'm a fat guy doesn't mean I don't win.
This is nothing to do with the switch matrix, which is what we're going to talk about. So if you were here with us moments ago, we finished up the lamp matrix. Switch matrix and lamp matrix are conceptually very, very similar. One is input, one is output. Switches are inputs, lamps are outputs. There are certain very rare cases where they're actually both, but those are a different topic. So, matrix, what we mean by that is columns and rows. Now, something to note on this. We have item number 1, plumb bob tilt. We have item number 2, C-side power AC relay. You will note that item number 17 is blank. That means that there is no switch that the computer is expecting to see any signal from in this particular machine. Not this machine, but bad cats. Pinbot very well might have a number 17 used.
Let me jump in there real quick, David. The funny thing about a switch matrix is in bad cats, you'll see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's over, looks like about 15 that are not used within the matrix. And there are still switches in the game that are not part of the switch matrix. Those are dedicated switches.
Common places you'll see dedicated switches are your slingshots, or in many cases, the flippers. Pop bumpers may or may not be switch controlled. Yeah. Older machines actually hardwired those that when the contact was hit, it fired the relay, or well, fired the solenoid.
Sometimes your diagnostic switches, half of them are in the matrix. Sometimes all of them are in the matrix. And
high score reset
in
this particular machine is part of your diagnostic set. But
the advanced button is not.
So if you are going, well, I could have sworn I just made that shot, but it didn't give me my points. You may have a couple of things. You may have a bad matrix column, bad matrix row. You may have a bad switch. You may have a broken wire. You may have a variety of things going on there that you'll start diagnosing by go through the game, go into self-test, start looking, okay, you want to test switch number 1. It's going to be flashing in some manner, this indication, switch number 1. Depending on the machine, it may also say plumb bob tilt. Check that switch. Make it, keep notes. Don't worry about the matrix at this point. Just note, switch number 1 doesn't work. Switch number 5 doesn't work. Switch number 37 doesn't work. When you've got that list, then you can come back and go, oh wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all out. What's that tell you? You got to call them out. It gets trickier when you realize you have switch number 41, 43, and 44 out. Well, wait a second. You don't think about it because, well, 45, 46, these didn't show up. It's because they don't get used in this case. You still have a whole column out.
One of the nice diagnostic features about the WPC generation of Williams and later, and in some of the data east around the WPC generation, is that when you go into the switch matrix, it brings up a box that looks just like that. The switches that are made will be highlighted with a dot in the center of the box. And so you can actually see what the game thinks is closed at any given time, just going into that.
But look at your diagrams. You will go insane trying to get all of them to light up.
Yeah.
If they didn't use it.
The other thing is where I just said it thinks this switch is closed. The problem in the WPC and later is that a lot of times they changed the matrix and used a 2803 to run one side of the matrix, and then they used LM339 chips to run the other side. The LM339 runs the rows, the 2803 runs the columns. And a lot of times what will happen is that the 2803 goes bad. And that 2803 is one chip instead of 8 individual transistors. And so you'll be missing 5 or 6 switches. They don't exist. And that's because that chip has failed. And what Williams found out was later on, they were like, oh, these fail pretty often. We should socket this. So if you own a WPC game where the 2803 has been socketed, it either A, came that way, or, well, somebody went, oh, I've had this problem. More likely than not, somebody had that problem and changed it out.
If you ever pull a chip off a board and you don't put a socket in it, I'm going to come to your house while you're sleeping and beat you with a pillow. It may have a brick in it too. This is from anybody who ever has to work on boards. There'll be a line of us wanting to beat you with that pillow. It's a little more work. It costs pennies to do it, but it saves you a lot of problems later down.
Well, if a 2803 failed once, it could fail again. I mean, and the traces on a WPC board are so small that the more times you solder and unsolder them, the more risk you take in destroying that trace.
Pinball machines are one of the most destructive environments for electronic components in existence.
But it's fun.
You have aerospace rated components, you have military rated components, you have automotive rated components, and you have consumer rated components. These were built with consumer rated components and they should have been at least mil spec. But those things cost a lot more. The manufacturer needed them to last out the warranty, which is roughly 90 days. At that point, they stopped caring anymore. They want to sell you a new machine. They don't really care about selling you that little part. They don't care about how repairable it is in the long run. The fact that we're running these machines 30 years later would be dumbfounding to the engineers if you told them back when they were designing them. Okay, so matrix.
Now here's another good one about the matrix. When you have any System 9 Williams or higher, if you press the start button and the ball does not eject, most likely you have a problem with your switches in your trough.
If the game can't find all the balls, it won't start the game. That was one of Williams' patents, is self-healing games. Yeah. They knew how to adapt if certain components failed. If a switch didn't work and a mode required it, it would try to route the play field rules around that. Write a pin bot, it's got 4 faces. If it can't switch faces, you're never going to see those other modes, but it's going to keep on playing happily. You lock it, it's going to kick them out, it's going to do its best to keep going. But if it can't find the balls, it's just going to say, hey, I can't find the balls. I can't start the game, sorry. They're doing their best to give the consumer who dropped their token or quarter the best game they can.
Most of the later System 11 or later will tell you pinball missing. Most of them. Then again, some of them, like Stern's Star Trek that came out last year or the year before.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll get 1, possibly even 2 balls stuck behind the Vengeance, and the Vengeance is the toy that looks like the Enterprise. And you'll get 1 or 2 balls stuck up underneath the Vengeance. Game doesn't care. It'll play until you lock however many balls that it has. Then you're screwed because it doesn't have a ball to kick out. That's when your game ends. And that's when you go, it doesn't work.
Well, yeah, you're right, it didn't. Let's see. Okay, so we talked about some of this. If you watch the lamp matrix, we'll go into, you'll note that these all say green and something else. Green, brown, green, red, green, orange, green, yellow. Green, the first word is the base color of the wire. Then you have the stripe or dash color. Some wires will actually have a continuous
Cops are
stripe.
coming.
Yeah, okay. I can explain this to them too.
Just checking.
There's no outstanding warrants right now.
Okay.
Okay, you paid the fines.
All right.
Continuing on. On the rows, you also have the same thing, white and brown, white and red, white and orange. This is how you can track this whole column is going to have, every piece is going to have 2 wires going into it. You find
Except
the green,
the last one.
well, no, it's still going to have 2 wires, but it may not have wires coming out.
Right.
Okay, so plumb bob tilt. It's going to have a green-brown wire, it's going to have a white-brown wire, and there's going to be a diode on there also. The diode is how the matrix isolates this switch from others in the column and in the row. Won't go into electronics theory. It does work. There's descriptions in many of the old pinball manuals that talk about it if you want the actual nitty-gritty. But this is how you can start to track if these 3 switches in a column aren't working, but these are, you've got a broken wire basically here. Either on the out of this side, because it's going to come in and come back out, or on the input of this side, because that's going to kill the rest of the chain. Same thing happens going across. You start tracking the white-blue wire from board number 1, J, which means connector. I don't know why they called it J. Jack and plug.
J, header.
Well, yeah.
P is plug.
Yes, I know, but I'm talking about use like Jing, whatever. Okay, number 10, pin number 3. So you could check from the board. This point is going to go all down these. So you can trace the white and blue wire from there, through the head, down through the neck, under the play field, to the left coin chute, and then it's going to go to the ball shooter, the doghouse kick big, and so on and so forth. You can watch that wire go all the way down the line. As the doctor was saying, it'll be 2 wires. There'll be a white-blue wire, but there'll be an in and then an out, an in and an out, in and out, until the end when it just terminates. It may go here first, or it may go here first. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing from the top down.
Our most recent example of a switch matrix failure was a friend that bought a Whirlwind. And he got this from a route operator who, well, he kind of thinks he knows what he's doing, but not so much. Anyway,
anytime you get a game from an operator, he is there to make money. He's going to do whatever he can to get it back up, so make money again very, very quickly.
They will literally use bubblegum and baling wire on a lot of occasions.
Yes.
Because they're, like David says, their goal is they need to make money.
If he has the right part in his toolbox right now, he'll be glad to use it. If he doesn't have the right part right now, he will make do with what he's got.
Yeah.
Because coming back costs him money.
So this Whirlwind came in, and our friend says, well, switch A and switch B do not work. And they were physically broken. Okay, so he went out and he bought switch A and switch B, got them in and soldered them in. He was so proud of himself that he did this. And he says, Doc, they still don't work. I was, okay. Did you look at the matrix? And the blank look came. And so as we're going through the matrix, we're going down the column of the matrix. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where's 6? It's, 6 is right here. The operator had actually repaired this switch at one point in time, removed the wire, and never put it back. So as it goes from the daisy chain, it jumps from this switch to this switch. This one jumper wire was not there. So these two switches that don't work have no connection in the column. I said, hang on a second. I went over to my tool bag and I grabbed a piece of wire and I solder, 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 solder. Try them now. Ah, they work. But now it blows a fuse. Well, the reason the operator pulled that wire out was because he changed a solenoid. And the solenoid was a direction-specific solenoid. It had to be mounted in a certain position in order to keep from shorting out every time the switch was made. And he put it in
180 out.
180
backwards.
So every time the switch was made, short out, you lose your solenoid voltage. Take it out, take that wire, that switch wire out, game works fine.
Except for those two switches.
Except for those two switches and the solenoid.
Yeah.
So.
Was the game trying to fire the solenoid backwards?
No,
it was, no. As soon as you made the switch, it grounded on the solenoid. Because it was a little tiny solenoid, about this big. And it has to mount, it's got like a ledge on it, and it has to mount this way. And what they did is they mounted it this way. And when they did that,
so it's this
switch
part
hit
sticking
the
out.
solenoid and grounded.
You could
grounded
put
the
this
solenoid.
switch in with that lip showing this way or this way, and it doesn't make any difference electrically to the solenoid, but it was rubbing against something else because it was
The
mounted in
switch.
backwards.
Yeah, these connections right here were of such direction so that he had they were this way. They were flipped over here, and when they were flipped over here, the game was so tight that the switch, as soon as the switch made, it touched both connections together.
So a lot of these switches, well, you can see it on this one, floppity, floppity, floppity. Well, any leaf switch has play, but when it's not being activated, it wouldn't be touching. You activate it and it hit that, and that's where you get your pop. And that's actually going to quite possibly ruin things big time, because your solenoid's running at
43 volts on
43 volts. Your switches are running at 5. You drop a 43 into a 5, and you got pop chips in the board.
Well, and then again, when you get to the WPC and higher, and WPC and your Stearns and your whatnot, they run on 75 volts. They've got a 50 with a 25 backup.
So it
They
gets
run
all
about
worse.
75.
Yeah, these things, you're putting 75 volts into a 5-volt bucket. It overflows. Any questions? Anything that we didn't cover that you want us to cover? Anybody awake?
Okay, we're going to show you.
Well,
Go ahead.
question about flipper buttons,
Sure.
which may or may not be in the matrix. I mean, they are.
They are not in the
somewhat-
matrix.
Well, it's not in the
Depends.
matrix, but they are controllable.
Yes.
Depends on the machine.
Right.
If you have my Twilight Zone, okay?
Well, that is in the matrix. You're right.
Yeah, it's fully controlled. The CPU sees the switch, and then it fires the solenoid for the flipper as a separate circuit. There are older pins that this is effectively controlling the flipper voltage, but it's controlled also by a relay that shuts down the voltage to there. You're doing this, and the computer's still seeing it, and it's kind of firing it, but it's turned that off, so there's no voltage to the flippers. So it depends on the era of the pin.
Right. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's also the ones where it's the skill shot is moving things back and forth, so that's got to be in the matrix.
Okay.
But for mine specifically, which again it's an 81 machine,
Okay.
it's directly connected, and so the leaf switch that the flipper button is activating gets pretty black, gets pitted.
Yes.
Is there a sanctioned technique for
The be-
doing
the-
a low voltage
one of-
switch
one
to,
of
a,
the-
to a relay or something? To a,
Oh.
You're trying to
Transistor?
trying to eliminate the pitting.
Trying to get, yeah.
The arc
yeah.
is the reason that you have arc is one of two things. Either your contacts are worn, or you have too much gap in your end of stroke switch at the actual flipper solenoid, your end of stroke switch. This arc, you'll see a lot of times, if you turn this on and you start flipping it, and you're flipping away, and you see a big arc, your gap is, either your contacts or your gap is bad. One of the two. And that arc you'll also see down here.
Yeah.
Right, these are the ones that I see getting like black.
It's
I had to file them for a while, and then I just replaced them.
actually filing them.
Filing them destroys them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay.
If they're gold plated, well, it's using gold plated switches is the first step because they don't tend to arc as bad. Well, they don't arc until they're worn. Once they're worn, they start to arc. If they were gold plated and you use anything abrasive on them, you just ruin the gold plating, and now they're going to arc. They're consumable.
One of the best things you can do to clean your switches is
matchbook.
There's that. Matchbook is probably number 2. Number 1 is to take a dollar bill and run a dollar bill in between the contacts.
Pull it in
hold
half,
the contacts
hold them
tight, and work
That's
it.
more what I meant. I didn't mean literally a
Yeah,
file.
yeah.
Well, okay.
See,
Well,
we
there
have
are
to take you at your word.
There are files for contacts,
People,
depending on the type of contact.
generally speaking, when people tell us they've used a file on contacts, no bullshit. They're talking about a jeweler's file, or in some cases, a bastard file, a big, I filed it.
Or an emery
I don't know
board,
why
or-
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
If I was going to use a file on a set of contacts, maybe I'd use an emery board, but nothing stronger than an emery board.
We have a kind of a question request from our online audience. They were wondering if you would discuss about a flipper button opto burning up the flipper coil when the opto gets dirty.
Okay.
That's not exactly how that happens.
Well, what's happened is the opto is dirty, it thinks the switch is always on, and it's basically holding that. Now, that should not happen. You should be able to hold that button for the rest of your life and not burn anything up.
In theory.
What that means is you have end of stroke problems also.
Yeah.
And so it didn't shut off the pull side of your flipper. And
The
That's
pull
gotten
side,
hot.
the pull side is the 50 volt side, and you're not shutting down the 50 volt side, and that's what's causing that to burn up.
there's a
It
combination of two
should be
problems.
cutting down to 25 volts
Yeah.
for the whole
hold side.
circuit.
So you got two problems. You got a bad opto or your dirty opto, which is causing you to be always held on, and then you've got a stroke problem. You solve one. If you solve the opto, you're not going to see it because you're going to be hitting it a lot. But if you were to press and hold, that coil is going to get warm. So if you're doing a lot of catching, your coil's on its way to burning out. You need to solve your end of stroke.
The end of stroke is the one that you need to solve first. You need to solve that end of stroke problem first.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter so much in the newer games, right? It's the older games that have
Nope,
that
no,
problem.
it doesn't. It depends.
End of stroke is key in just about every generation of games.
Yeah.
Of course, it's always going to be more key in an electromechanical, because of the age, and they all work on contacts and that.
Well, there's differences, in the way end of stroke works in different generations. So this is actually running one voltage in to two different windings, and as it hits the end of stroke, it's closing one side, opening the other, and that is mechanically switching which part of the coil it's using. A different machine, my Twilight Zone, this is a controlled end of stroke, and it actually changes the voltage it's feeding the coil with. There are others that do PWM. They're doing it's pulse width modulation. They're changing the way that they control the coil for a hold. The newer machines are doing this. There's the mechanical, the control, lots of different ways depending on the generation of the pin. As they kept trying to improve this because it's a big problem. Coil burnup is something that they don't really like to have happen. You can have fires, you can have destroyed machines, and nobody really wants that.
So some of your latest pins, your Jersey Jack pinball, some of your latest Stearns, new manufacturer fast pinball, are working on controlling the voltage through the actual hardware, the MPU, the motherboard, so that it's kind of taking away the mechanical element as much as possible to avoid letting a coil burn up. So if a computer can reduce it like that, as opposed to a switch like this, maybe you'll save your coil. That's the theory, anyways.
But if your CPU locks up, you can still burn up stuff. There's a reason that my Adams family has fuses for the magnets under the playfield, because those will lock on and they'll get hot in a hurry and they'll burn the playfield. You have a fuse in there to keep that from happening.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I have one more.
Sure.
Earlier you were talking about things where they were called dedicated switches. Can you just define
Yeah.
exactly what that means?
Dedicated switch. Okay, so this is the slingshot assembly for left side. There is these two switches, which are, if you look at a slingshot, there's a piece of rubber, there's a couple of switches, and a pawl that fires back. When that switch gets hit, it makes a contact. That's dedicated to controlling
That fires the
solenoid.
pawl.
That actually closes that circuit to engage this. So you turn on a machine and you hear crack, a bunch of solenoids just fired off. Turn it off and start looking for stuck dedicated switches. They're common in older machines with the slingshots and your pop bumpers.
Another time you hear that is when you turn the machine on and it will machine gun. That's a dedicated switch that's stuck. Usually dedicated switch.
If you see that, you've got one of these switches, one of the contacts has gotten bent after being hit enough times, clear that space. Nice little gap, not a lot, but just a little. That should clear the problem. It's a little bit harder with pop bumpers because you have to disassemble more. But I see it a lot, or what will happen with slingshots in particular, the rubber will have jumped behind the switch and be pulling the backside towards the front. I've seen that many a time.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay.
So in relation to the switch matrix, does that mean that
It's not in the matrix. It's
does that mean dedicated switches would probably have their own transistor on the backboard?
if they're not a direct voltage switch like this, where this is actually running, it's closing the voltage to this.
95% of dedicated switches do not have a diode anywhere in them.
Because they're not
They
they're
just
not
don't require
segmenting from each other, so you don't need the diode. Like this is a dedicated switch, but it's not controlled. The CPU never sees it. So you go into self-test, and you can do this all day long, and you never see anything because it's not a CPU monitored switch. It's part of the circuit built in. Doesn't always end up that way, depending on your pin, generation, blah, blah, blah. Some of these may be controlled or not. It gets interesting if you have matrixed opto switches.
Yeah.
Those get twitchy because there's a transistor and a receiver, and it gets more, yeah.
And basically an opto is a diode.
It's a diode.
And a receiver diode.
And a receiver diode. And they're usually running IR, so you can't tell that it's bad visually. Yeah. Whole other seminar on optos.
Yeah. So in our last 3 minutes, I'm gonna give you a little special preview of what's later to come. Later to come this evening, Bill Witzel and I will be discussing the Williams System 11 reset mod. I don't exactly know who designed the hack. Might have been Leon, whoever. It's a wonderful thing. It fixes a lot of problems with the Williams System 11 MPU. And what we'll be displaying with that is a Williams System 11 test rig that I built and designed. It's certainly not complete at this point. I didn't design this to sell it, and no, I'm not interested in selling it. I fix a lot of Williams System 11 stuff. So this is for ease of this guy. And
I'm lazy.
Yeah. So anyway,
efficient.
Once again, I used Bad Cats. And the reason I use Bad Cats is because it has the two displays, one on top of the other. Makes it real easy to see. Okay, and hopefully everybody can see it. Right now the display is, this is actually a Pinbot board. It did not come out of this Pinbot, it came out of my Pinbot, running Bad Cats ROMs. And it's currently up and in game mode. What I have down here at the bottom is, this is the switch matrix. And this is what we were talking about. What is it, 1J10 and 1J8.
Yeah.
And what I've incorporated in here, actually I remember how to do this. Okay, oops.
Switch levels.
Yeah, okay, switch levels. Right now it's on
Right return.
right return, switch number 31. Simply by moving any one of these jumper wires on the bottom, there's only two of them, we can run the matrix. And you can do it with it switch up.
Yeah.
So we started with switch number 31. Pick a different one.
Okay. Right now there is no connection on both the column and the row, so there's no switch hit. So I move this. Now we're on 26. This comes down to which column are we on, which row are we on. That's the switch that we end result. Now, if you were to hit 2 or 3 of these at once,
It would give you multiple numbers.
It'll give you multiple numbers. One thing to note is that it's actually not checking them all at once. Just like the lamp matrix does, it cycles through all the switches in a loop and checks, is this one good? Is this one good? Well, is this one on? Is this one on? Is this one on? But it does it fast enough that it appears to you that it's checking them all at once. If you'd had multiple jumpers,
test,
if you had multiple jumpers, you're going to see multiple things.
And these will cycle through, as David says, on here. On this unit, it would cycle through as the first number, the second number, and the third number, and in a repeating loop.
Yeah, not quite getting it. Okay,
Yeah.
try to jumper 2. No. All right.
Yeah.
So.
But our other speaker, Bill Witzel, and I discussed this unit the other day, and we will be incorporating the lamp matrix into it and the solenoid matrix into it modularly so that we can test those as well. Those particular modules, we might actually make those and sell those for people. To where anybody that's ever worked on a System 11 knows that once you have the display open, you can't see what's going on when you're working on the board. You know, and if you can take a small module about this big, plug it into the board and see what it's doing while you've got it open, might be useful. You know, and we're not looking to do this to make money. We're looking to do this to help the community. And that is the pinball community. So this is just a little preview of what's to come later on this evening. Oops.